Hello Space Chums and welcome to episode 3 of Liftoff, where we lift the lid off the bulk space and talk about stuff which isn't talked about enough. Can you believe it? We're already end of February. Gosh, the clocks will be going forward soon. I can't wait for that. But today, let's get into the meat and grist of it and talk about episode 3, where we're going to hear from some splendid ladies talking about how do we get Generation Alpha into space in the first place. And I don't mean up like that, I mean into their heads. So without further ado, let me introduce my fantastic panel. We have Laura, we have Heidi, we have Jeni. Welcome to Liftoff.
Thank you very much.
I always like to start off these sessions by getting people to chat about themselves because they're much better at saying than I am. So, Laura, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Laura Carey and I'm here from the John Egging Trust today. We're a youth organisation that engages young people who are facing disadvantage, and we do that in order to raise their aspirations, develop their social and emotional learning skills, and ultimately help them to be the best version of themselves that they can. But the way we do that is by offering experiential learning programmes for our students that predominantly engage them in the STEM, aviation and space sector, which is why this is a really interesting and important conversation that we're having today, not least because my colleagues are currently out there raising aspirations, raising awareness of the industry and the opportunities that are out there for young people and really trying to kind of widen that participation. So that's why I'm here today, and it's a pleasure to do so.
And you have a very interesting background. I mean, 7 years in the military. Has that prepared you for the rigours of the work you're doing now?
I think it does. It prepares you for all sorts. And actually, I had a sort of STEM background, but it was really in kind of leadership and people skills, working with people, answering testing questions, which I hope won't happen today. But yes, it's an interesting, very different side of my career. And now I'm in the third sector, which is equally as meaningful and rewarding to me.
Great. Thank you very much. And Heidi, welcome to Liftoff, your first appearance on the channel. Tell us about the wonderful stuff you've been doing with Space Skills Alliance.
Well, thank you for having me. So I'm Heidi. I'm one of the directors of Space Skills Alliance, and we kind of describe ourselves as a think tank consultancy tackling the space skills gap. But what this means really is that we look at a lot of the data related to space skills and education and training and see what has the most impact and try and find out things like why people join the space industry and how much they're paid when they get here and all sorts of interesting questions. You've kind of shared your background a bit, but my background is in the kind of astronomy, astrophysics side of things. So I used to spend time up in telescopes in South Africa looking at binary stars and hoping they might one day merge, but that'll be about 20,000 years in the future.
Worth waiting for.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Jeni, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much. So I am Jeni Trice, also known as Professor Trice. I'm a founder, CEO and chief coding adventurer at Get With The Programme. My background is actually in the IT industry. I've had 25 years teaching adults, and as my children went through primary school, I could see that they needed more support from a technology and computing curriculum point of view. And so we've created content that's more like pantomime style, but embedded in real-world technologies. And so we have a moon landing coding adventure for 5 to 9-year-olds that it fits perfectly into this age range for the Generation Alpha. And it's all about inspiring the tech innovators in the future, possibly into space or to be part of the space industry, thinking about data, thinking about computer science, but also looking at underrepresented groups in STEM careers.
This is one of the most exciting episodes from my perspective because we're talking about one of the untalked about areas of space, which is the whole point of Liftoff. I always think it's good to start with a definition, an anchoring point. What is Generation Alpha? How would we define it?
We were discussing this, and I think it is, from the 0 to now, 14-year-olds, isn't it? But I think perhaps, the babies may not be listening to us, but we start 5-year-olds, so I'm saying 5 to 14. I don't know about you guys.
So, we work with young people sort of age 12 to 15, but we work left and right of that as well. But ultimately, I guess we're looking at a generation who were schooled through COVID, and most of them, they are far more technologically, digitally advanced than their certainly than I am, than I was at that age. Yep. So yes, sorry Heidi, if you've got anything to add.
I think the point around the kind of tech, IT generation, I guess, is very much the case, but they're very different to kind of the millennials, for example, which I'm part of. We had to deal with your computer going wrong and having to fix it yourself and actually kind of maybe pulling apart things or looking at the command line. The generation that's coming in, actually everything's on apps, everything's done for you, everything's very much in the kind of, you're using the front end and you don't go into that back end, so it's a very different experience.
Exactly,
yeah.
And I don't think they've necessarily got that understanding of opening the lid on it.
Yeah, so I think it's very similar to other generations, but different in a few ways.
Just a thought came wandering through Wizz Air and gone out that one now, but this is probably one of the benefits of COVID. If it can have that, you have, in that period of 2 to 3 years, a hyper acceleration of digital engagement with young people across a whole variety of content and platform. This is going to be a good one, so buckle up. Let's start off with, Jeni, you've got your particular initiative, Laura, and then obviously the perspective of the Skills Alliance. Is there one size that fits all for how we engage with this group?
I think that's an interesting question. I think, obviously, we've just said defined it as 5 to 14-year-olds, so that won't work.
Yep.
But I do think that bringing it down to basics and looking at stepping away from the screen sometimes is beneficial to everybody. So it's sometimes about looking at the concepts and the underlying technologies that are involved in going into space, in order to, or looking at data, or looking at, engagement that is actually going to work for everybody sometimes, but not always.
And do you find, obviously everybody else have a chat on it, do you find it difficult to get them to put their phones away? I mean,
Yes.
is there a magic switching off the router button wherever you go?
No, but I think, I don't know about how you do it at the John Egging Trust, but we do try and focus on unplugged activities as well as practical, physical, as well as online ones too, but learning about concepts that help expand their knowledge within the screen-based world as well as the off-screen world.
And we're talking about today the focus, rather wrong, the context is of our lovely little space caravan we have here in the background. It would be the space station, but cuts have made it a little bit smaller today. Do you find, Laura, that you use similar techniques when you're engaging with your group? I mean, you're working with, if I use the phrase socially disadvantaged, and I think it's probably better describing it. Are there different things which work better with your people than perhaps to people who are more advantageous?
For us, it's about experiential learning, that blend of we appreciate the importance of in-classroom activities, but it's also taking them out of that environment. And as you say, some of our students, they're facing disadvantage and extra challenges, socioeconomic disadvantage, and they not the case for all of our students by all means, but a number of them may not have sort of positive role models or access to inspiring places, spaces, people that give them that kind of aspiration and motivation to do something within, with their future, something positive. So I think for us, it's very much about blending that experiential learning, but also bringing it to a place where, we use iPads for our evaluation methodology, for example. We're increasingly using a bit of VR, talking about immersive technologies and kind of getting students to see. Essentially, you can't be what you can't see, is what we say. So getting the students to really engage practically, but blending that with technology, the use of technology, I think is really, really important.
And from the perspective of delivery, I know, Jeni, you go into schools or...
A lot of it's online delivery, actually.
Right, interesting.
So we do remote delivery. It means it's really scalable, and that's actually one of the advantages of lockdown. That's meant that we've gone from in-person delivery to filmed content. So at Get With The Programme, we can deliver 100 schools in one day. We do that for some of our customers who are funding the sponsorship and things along those lines. And it means also that we can reach so many more schools. We create role models for those underrepresented groups, normalise the visibility. And I think that sort of, Heidi, that brings into some of the work you do, where it's, making sure that people are inspired and understanding what's going on in the sort of industry from that point of view.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we kind of try to understand what inspires people, what are those drivers, and actually often you don't know until 20 years down the line when they've joined the workforce and answered a survey, which is where we come in. But on the points around experiential learning, we know now that actually there's so many inspirations, but going to a museum is still a massive inspiration. Actually doing something at school with a teacher in your lesson, like that's a huge impact. Going to an air show or going to something where something exciting is happening. These are some of the things that come up over and over again, rather than necessarily I just researched online. Obviously online kind of is becoming a bigger inspiration. But I think we can't forget about books, TV, film, actually going there in person and seeing something.
So it's the visceral experience,
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
I mean, that's sort of what we're aiming for with our events. It's to create those sort of visceral, they're like red letter days. And some of the children come away, they've drawn spaceships, they send them in to us. It's amazing, I love it. And some of the children we talk about Katherine Johnson and Margaret Hamilton, both who worked on the original Apollo missions.
Yes.
And the children come away saying, I had no idea there was someone that looked like me, Katherine Johnson, woman of colour, who was involved in those original missions. And that's the inspirational component I'm really interested in focusing on.
And actually, Jeni, I think it's also about that combination. So we were talking just before this about how we can connect and how your programmes augment what we deliver, those experiential learning opportunities and visits. So I think it's about, there's no one size fits all, certainly, but I think key to it is also about collaboration and understanding, and that kind of links a bit to your work as well, Heidi, understanding what is out there in terms of engagement opportunities. So linking with government, industry partners, other delivery organisations to not do things in isolation and kind of reinvent the wheel, because there's fantastic programmes out there, and it's about connecting and connecting the dots, I think, as well.
So in terms of, I'd love the mechanics of how this all works. I mean, obviously, Jeni had a bright idea on a Friday night and remembered it on Monday morning, and subsequently became...
Not quite like that, but not that
but
dissimilar.
Again, and obviously, the origins of the John Egan Trust, tragic as they are, there's a great legacy there. Have you found that your ways of, over the period of time which you've both been doing it, stuff has evolved? And we've talked about the impact of COVID. Has content changed? Has the type of company organisation you engage with, because whether you're going to schools or whether you're working with other parties, how do you change the way you work with them?
That's an interesting question. So we have found that we're working with schools and we are asked to go in a certain amount, and we are limiting that so we've got more capacity to reach more children, which impacts more underrepresented groups. So we've changed because of COVID, because we started filming. That's allowed us to create something that's more scalable and more accessible. But in some ways, I think we've still got the same aspirations, which were to reach out. I still make it into a physical representation of something, even though it's a filmed content. We get the children to join in and shout at the screen at our content. And we get funders from organisations. I mean, I've had an amazing opportunity. I've met you through your Space Alliance events, and also we've been to Space South Central when we were at UCL. And that collaboration part of it in the space industry has really helped us reach many more of that generation, and to kind of come back to that, how can we get more children properly involved in what the new space is going to look like? And collaboration is key.
Absolutely.
And it's very interesting, actually, because you remember back to episode 1, the benefits of space, are we failing to communicate? It trips off the tongue now, so easy, having said it so many times. This collaboration between the different organisations, if you think back 10 years before the advent of space clusters, before the UKSA started to have a more public profile, etc., if you'd asked me about what the benefits of space were, I would have said a bar where you can write upside down in water and a frying pan. And it's that engagement, it's showing the practical stuff, which is really, really, really important. Digital versus analog, I think we've covered that already, but you're a great believer, I think, in all the work you're doing about getting away from screen time. Is it 50-50, or what do you find? Do people want to do hands-on stuff?
I think you have to persuade them usually.
Persuade them, okay. Big button switch off the Wi-Fi.
But I think once you do, then you get a different level of engagement. I think there's a sort of a piece of that age group's brain that is sort of distracted constantly by a screen, and I think there are amazing things you can get from that, and obviously we're delivering our content through videos often, but getting them to stop and turn off that little piece of their brain so that it becomes a practical talking to each other, having discussions, working as a team. We actually work with an organisation that's all about impacting and learning extra skills that are part of that. It's called the Skills Builder framework. Thank you. And that's about leadership skills, and it's about positive dealing with negative situations, so kind of being positive. There's all sorts of things, listening, speaking. They've got 8 essential skills, and we're an impact organisation for them. And I think that sort of skill that you learn when you're not looking at a screen but actually speaking and experiencing is really important.
And if you provide those opportunities, activities, environments to do so, then naturally, even for some of our students, some of the schools say you can't have your phones with you anyway. Some of the places we take our students to, they can't have their phones. But actually, it's more so the activities and the fact that we need them to engage, because we're trying to develop their, as you've said, team working skills, their leadership ability, the communication, problem solving, all of those things that are actually needed in all walks of life, in all careers. That's what we're trying to develop. And if you create those opportunities, then it almost happens naturally that they're less interested in their phones. I would also say that, yes, sometimes bringing it into their world, it depends, because they're all different as well. I think that's the challenge. There's certain activities and sessions that we'll deliver that will appeal to some and not others. So, yeah, it's very varied in terms of...
And I was wondering, is it right for us to, take them out of their world or go to them, step towards them?
Yeah, exactly that. I think we're definitely mindful of that too.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that I often try to draw parallels between my day job and what we're talking about here. So my day job is actually to talk to startup companies, a lot of them in the space sector, etc. And I was staggered the other week. Met a glorious chap up in Edinburgh, and his raison d'etre for getting up in the morning, his day job is actually to run analog missions.
Oh, wow.
So he'll be going off to Svalbard or someplace in Poland, etc. He can't tell me where it is because I can't pronounce it, so that's fine. But they'll run from the very start to the very finish a parallel space mission with what's actually either going to be going up there or they're testing the procedures, etc. And he said the best fun he has is when he takes his spacesuit with him. And he has a spacesuit, by the way, a proper spacesuit, which could go up in a rocket, etc. He wouldn't want to take it much further than that. But he says when he engages with people of all ages, whether it's children, whether it's customs officials at JFK Airport, etc., it's when you show people tangible stuff, they can get their fingers into it. It's a great way of doing it.
And I have to say that the experience I've had working with the space community over the last year or so, I find that there's this sort of excitable aspect of that community. Everybody's, delightful and excited about the work they do because space is so exciting. So there's an aspect of this that I don't think we're going to have to engage them in space because it's exciting already, but it's about getting them to understand the depth of what's exciting as opposed to just being astronauts and spaceships and, the Earth-focused satellites and all those sorts of things, data that's going to come from that, how we can help save the planet. That's, I think, what we have to communicate to that age group so they know what's coming.
And I think the stuff which Heidi has been doing, the Skills Alliance, fundamentally underlines that, doesn't it?
Yeah, we did a census of people working in the space industry, so asked them questions about demographics, about why they wanted to work in space, what inspired them, what their pathways were. And overwhelmingly, people say they work in the space industry because they like space or they like solving interesting problems. Yep. And space offers both obviously the space, but also problems which are really interesting to tackle and really kind of get people's minds going. And if we look at then kind of an age breakdown, it's a bit of a stereotype, but you find that the younger people, the under 35s, tend to say, I really want to have an impact on science and technology, or I really want to benefit the planet. And those are kind of two big things that come out. And then as people age a bit more, they then have to think about, okay, I need a salary, I need a job that's close to home, I need to pay the mortgage, I need stability. But if we're thinking about how do we get young people, how do we get Gen Alpha involved in space, actually, yeah, they want to help the planet. We can say space is one of those ways that we can actually help the planet have that impact.
And I think that kind of communication and I think that's probably, earlier episodes have already probably touched on this. It's about what is this new space and what does it mean? And is it, rich gentlemen with their sort of spaceships going up there? No, or not gentlemen. It's not about that. It's about the technology advancements and the inspiration, and then all the jobs that come parallel to that, all the opportunities here on the planet that are part of the whole space industry that's also looking after our planet by watching the oceans and the rainforests and all those sorts of things. I think it's fascinating.
So here's a question to our viewers, and I should know the answer if I've done my research properly. If there are, say, half a dozen astronauts up in the ISS, how many people on the ground are actually directly involved in supporting them? And then if we spread that out like ripples in a pond, how many people in other industries, other companies all around the world are directly benefiting from the stuff that 6 people up there are providing, collating and sending down? So I'll put that out for the viewers. Answers in the comments below. Thanks. So we talked about the different methods, digital versus analog. We've talked about the great engagement actually with the industry, because I'm always a bit jaundiced. Space has changed in the last probably 10 years in terms of how open it is. Do you find it's coming from a particular group? Is it the very bright young things, the startup companies, etc., who are more engaging, or are the primes taking the more corporate route to engaging with you in these types of strategies across all the work you do?
For us, it's the primes who are kind of getting involved and are interested in supporting us. We do some work that's connected to social value, and if they've got funding from the government, then we've got some wonderful engagement that is happening at that point. But the collaboration in the sort of smaller detail comes more from the smaller entrepreneurs and the exciting and conversations, the passion. And that's not to say that there isn't passion in people in those primes, but I find, obviously they've got more flexibility. And what about you guys?
I mean, it's very much similar. There's a lot of big funded programs by the likes of kind of Airbus. They've done some great stuff with their graduate trainee program and taking students to things like the Farnborough Air Show to kind of actually have that hands-on inspiration point. But yes, exactly, the kind of small companies, there's a lot of excitement. It's just they don't often have as much time to engage, and actually going into a school or delivering a talk, everyone thinks, it's only an hour of your time, but then you've got to get there, you've got to set up the talk, you've got kind of writing your talk, and actually for a small company that can be quite a challenge. So I think things that it's really good to have these kind of overarching programs that can do that engagement and bring that inspiration from the small companies. And things like ESRO UK, which is the European Space Education Resources Office, UK, they have loads of resources online that people can just pick up and go, rather than having to, for SMEs, they can bring that inspiration but not have to do all of the work themselves.
Actually, so we've just got some funding from the Civil Aviation Authority through the Department of Transport, and we're running our moon landing coding adventures, and part of the nomination is that you can nominate a school, but you could also volunteer to go into that school. So the teachers run the events, but anyone can volunteer and be part of that. So we're looking at getting more engagement for that, particularly World Space Week in October when that happens, but any time prior to that as well.
My nerd alert just went off very loudly in my ear. A moon coding event, sorry.
Moon landing coding adventure.
Young people learning how to get something there down to there.
It's actually learning about the historical first moon landing.
Excellent. Which did happen, by the way.
Which did happen, by the way.
I want to get that out to the viewers.
So it's giving them that historical reference. And like as I mentioned, Catherine Johnson and Margaret Hamilton, we sort of focus on people from the broader side of things that aren't, yes, there's that Neil Armstrong guy, but I'm more interested in certain other people. And we send Al the robot, she's a female robot, her name's short for Algorithm, we send her to the moon. If she lands successfully, which she does, she says one small step for a robot, one giant leap for school children everywhere. So that's part of the thing.
Here. Thoroughly endorse that. Laura, I'd like to come back to the work you do, because it's when we originally were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, you're coming from a slightly different non-space orientated aspect. And that was what really interested me in how we can fit this in, because there is a very clear synergy. What sort of businesses and organisations do you engage with? And actually, where do you go about doing the great work that Jet does?
Well, as I said before, we kind of engage with 60 corporate partners who help us to co-deliver the programmes. They are predominantly from aviation, STEM industry and now space. But, we're not limited to that. But it's really important that within those organisations, we're sharing the opportunities and highlighting the opportunities, that we're not just saying, you could work for Northrop Grumman or the Civil Aviation Authority or whoever, and do something very STEM oriented. Yes, absolutely. And as I said earlier, to you, Jeni, we might increase STEM skills as a byproduct of our programs, but that's not the main aim. But it's also about using the space industry more broadly, and what does it take, the wider team, to achieve what the space industry is trying to do. So, it's like a microcosm of, wider society. You've got so many different opportunities from HR, from media and comms. It's not just about those STEM
as well,
absolutely
recruitment, all sorts of
and
things.
I think it's about showing them that as well, and say, okay, yes, we want to see if you're interested in STEM careers, brilliant. But if you're not, you can still be part of this amazing opportunity in the development by using what you're interested in your skill sets kind of lean you to. So it really is about getting young people to see the whole, not just the small parts or the more obvious parts, maybe.
This is really interesting because here we are in episode 3 and we're hurtling through the year. I can't believe how quickly the last 2 months are gone. In a couple of episodes' time, we're going to have Heidi back on talking about the skills gap, how to go about addressing it, because it's one of the, the many elephants in the room when we're talking about this. So Heidi, look forward to catching up on that, because you've got some great work you did with your survey earlier on.
Absolutely.
You mentioned about, we talked about how this generation wants to get more engaged. Is there a better understanding of what actually space impacts and what it can deliver? The internet is obviously the first thing, but are they aware of broader issues, the understanding of the universe? That's a bit of a cliche, but the broader science aspects, or the changes in industry, for example, the manufacture of drugs in space? Jeni, from your experience.
So I've been really interested in the idea of manufacturing drugs in space, and that sounds, I understand it's going to potentially change quite a lot because they can create much more pure drugs, and so the crystals are purer so that they can administer them at home rather than in hospitals, and the savings associated with that are astounding. And it's the kind of thing that, perhaps creating these laboratories in space, there was no particular purpose for that, but it's now the purpose has become clear and there are these amazing opportunities. But just hearing about those sorts of things, I get quite excited about that conversation, and ensuring that those young people get to hear about all these different components that make up this amazing growing space industry and how it actually affects us on our planet. I don't think that the kids necessarily understand the sort of satellite effect that has on their internet, mobile phones, all those sorts of things. I don't know about you guys, but...
No, and that's sort of the more obvious things. And there's, farmers are using it for, and monitoring sea kelp. There's so many things that... And I think it's about making it obviously relevant to them. But, I think, as you say, some of them don't even know the importance of... And going to your cash machine, getting your money out, your GPS system, how did I get here today? Yeah. There's those really... what I think maybe for me are more obvious things, but there's the medicine advancements, what it can do for humanity, that really is important to look beyond the more obvious, I think. And
they're great anchor points to start a conversation, Where did you lose your phone? Which happens to my daughter when she was younger. If you're listening to this, Sarah, happened on a frequent occasions. It wouldn't be possible, without the advances of that. Let's move on a little at this stage now. And so, mortal line from giant steps are what you take when you're walking on the moon. Now, for a person of my generation, that's obviously from the police. From the children's perspective, students, that's a generational description on my side. From the students' perspective, do they still think that's a really cool thing, that somebody went 250,000 miles away in a box no bigger than a VW camper van, etc., and it took them 5 days to get there, etc.? What's their feeling about these cool things?
What do you think?
Go on.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be groups that find it incredibly inspiring, and I grew up far after the moon landings happened, and I found that something that really inspired me, and I think a lot of other people that I went to university with and also went into space around my age as well. When we look at, again, some of that kind of data from the census about what inspired you, we actually made a graph of age versus were you inspired by historic events. And the examples we gave were things like Apollo, the shuttle, Tim Peake, going up into space in 2015. And when we look at that graph, you can see a little bump at Apollo, and then it kind of goes down again, a little bump around Tim Peake. So you can see that kind of Tim Peake effect actually inspiring people to work. A Tim Peake peak, exactly, a Tim Peake peak. And so I think I think there will always be the inspiration of the moon landings, but as we have other space activities that are well publicised in the media, that are just part of people's daily lives, you hear on the news, you look on social media, that's going to inspire people as well. So with the next round of astronauts from the UK, we might see another peak happening. I don't know.
I should add, though, we can't forget Helen Sharman.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, Helen, if you are watching this, we're hurtling through the series. Do come on and give your views on what's happened in the last 30 or 40 years. I'd now like to move the conversation to where do we think we can improve how we engage with people. Have we reached, peak delivery in terms of the best way of doing it? Or are you already at this stage, Jen, Laura, thinking of innovative ways of engaging? Because I won't say staleness, but you've moved into the digital environment, which means you have broader outreach. How do you come up with new ideas?
I think there's an aspect to that is, see what is working and look at the way that, improvement and engagement happens. I think there is this opportunity to look at gamifying and again, that's a step towards that generation alpha. But I do think that what we do works and it creates that engagement. So there's two sides to it: improve and process and extend, but also don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it attitude. I think there's so many children that still don't get the opportunities and still haven't had that moment of inspiration. And actually, it reminds me, going back to that idea about the impact of COVID and how actually some children found, technology was their friend and they got more and more engaged in it. Some households did not have enough technology for every child to be able to have their lessons. And it's that kind of lack of technology in some environments. Some children didn't have role models.
That widened, didn't it?
And that digital, we want to think about digital inclusivity and space inclusivity and making sure everybody can feel involved and part of it, and not just those who've got the tech, the latest phone in their hands. And I think that's really quite an important aspect of it.
Which I think leads directly into the great work you're doing, actually, Laura.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I'd also say, the challenge that we often face is not knowing what's worked until maybe 10 years' time.
Yeah, we have
there's
the
the
same problem.
constant evaluation that we do, so we can get a snapshot of where the young people are at now. But really we want to know, what impact is this having in 10 years' time? How are we feeding the sector? Are we, are we reducing NEET numbers, so not in employment, education, training? So I think really important is ongoing monitoring and evaluation. I also will go back to that kind of collaborative approach, from government and other organisations as well. But, I'd add asking young people too, giving young people a voice, constantly kind of getting that feedback on did you think that session worked? And you can do that
lovely quotes actually that the teachers give us. Sort of, I hadn't. It was really exciting to see. I want to go and make a spaceship, but we want them to go. I want to go and solve the planet issues because we understand how it works better. That's my next sort of step. Is not think about it only as astronauts and spaceships, but as we've said before, think about the practical skills that they can do on the planet. This planet that affects it from space.
Laura, coming back to the great work which Jet does, and it's we're fortunate enough that we've been brought up in stable homes and gone to education, whether it's school or into tertiary education. Do you find that you're pushing against quite a lot locked doors, trying to bring these groups of people, young people you're working with in, and how do you dismantle that and get rid of the do-gooder? How do you put across the honest intention of what Jet's all about?
Absolutely. So I think for the first part is, how we get to our young people. And we work through schools. That's how we select our young people. And they help us to understand who would most benefit from the programmes. I think what's sometimes difficult is if they're facing challenges with school attendance as well, because our programmes are delivered in school time, in term time, making sure that they can attend as many of the sessions as possible. So we've also got that challenge of engaging the young people, but engaging the parents as well. Because I think as I said before, and I do labour this, it's not all of our students, but some are, 70% plus are facing economic disadvantage. And we gauge that by free school meals, being in the top 30% of IMD deprivation. So they don't necessarily have those role models at home. They might be the first generation to go to university. They might be from workless families, and they might have these additional challenges going on at home that they're trying to deal with. But I think the nature of our programmes is actually we're sort of helping them, if we can get them on the programmes, we're helping them to work through some of those issues. Sort of resilience, confidence, self-belief is key for our students, because often they might have the aspiration to do something, but they might not have the self-belief that they actually can, and they might just think it's out of their reach. So it's working with the students and being really clear early on with them. This is the purpose of the programme. This is what we're hoping to achieve with it. But engaging parents as well, and getting the wider school community on board with the importance of those skills that we're trying to develop, the social, emotional learning.
For our Reach for the Sky Civil Aviation grant, we're extending some of the homework to be more about, ask your parents about and research with them about space industry careers, so that it creates that community learning.
Yes,
So that not only are we asking the students to look into it and get an own understanding for themselves, they're actually discussing it with their parents, who can then go away and go, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about that from my point of view. Yeah. And you can create that really fascinating extension of community and learning from the children to the adults that I think is so valuable. The other thing that I was just thinking of as you were saying about accessing the students, I find sometimes the schools with these higher, with these sort of higher free school lunch aspects, they've got a lot of challenges going on in the schools, and they're quite hard to reach because they're so busy. Yes. So that's the tricky bit, is we want to reach those schools that need our help and our support, running our content, but they're too busy to find the capacity.
Sort of facilitate.
This is a really interesting point, because you talked about how your delivery mechanisms that have evolved.
Yeah.
They've gone from analog to digital.
Yeah.
And obviously it suits economies of scale as well, because there's only one Professor Trice. And
I get other people to wear the white coat sometimes.
That's fine. That's okay, no problem at all. Other white coats are available. But with the structure of Jet, you're very much regional based, aren't you? So are you very much on the ground delivery, person to person, child to child, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. And we build the programmes based upon the needs, and we go where the need is, but we build, as I say, the activities around what's locally available to them. Yeah. We've got a kind of remit, we'll go an hour's distance roughly from, unless we're doing a big sort of event, we might go a bit further, but it's really using what's there for them. Sometimes it's on their doorstep, but they either don't know it's there, or it's like Emma, when she described why she set up Jet, was that young people just outside the wire of RAF stations were seeing these jets flying and either not giving them a second thought or thinking, oh, that's so far out of my reach, I don't know what goes on behind there. And I suppose we still have that same kind of principle, but it's very much developed on what is around them, which is why those, our corporate partnerships are so important to us, because again, some of our students in the south, they might work with Microsoft, they might work with Northrop Grumman, depending on who or CAA as well. And then you might go to sort of North Wales working with BAE Systems. So the programmes, the delivery looks somewhat different in terms of the partners, but the core is there. The curriculum, the programme specification is there. And our staff deliver it in conjunction with our partners. So there's, the key ingredients are the programme, the curriculum, the corporate inspirational people, hopefully, that are representative of the young people, see it, be it. And, our staff who are trained youth workers, qualified teachers, some of them, who really can pull out the learning objectives and make sure that we're doing what we should be, and that there's a level of consistency and quality in what we do.
And obviously taking the work which Heidi's doing to identify what the industry needs, that feeds in directly as to how you can sow the seeds effectively.
Yes, absolutely. And it's about going to taking students to universities, colleges as well, and seeing what the courses are, and understanding, linking with that, what does the industry actually need skills-wise, aside. We know that they all need these I dare say softer skills. Fee will kill me for saying that. But then transferable skills. Thank
Transferable,
you.
yes.
Thank you. That's right.
No,
Heidi,
soft
thank
is
you.
okay, I get that, yeah.
Transferable skills. Combining that with what is the actual need and what are the gaps, but also what does the future look like by the time some of your students, Jeni, and our students sort of get to that point? You're just looking at gaps in skills that we don't necessarily know yet. Your work, Heidi, is obviously looking at that. But
I mean, one of the challenges, we don't know what missions are going to be happening in 5 or 10 years' time, and actually a lot of that relies on very long-term ministerial funding, ESA, European Space Agency funding. And actually, you might be able to say, okay, well, we're expecting that mission to Jupiter in 2050, so actually we need to start building the skills now to be able to build that up, and it's really long term.
But that's interesting, because we talk about it's going to be 20, 30, 40 years before we go to Jupiter or somewhere else, other planets are available. It's how do you set the expectation? Because if you're going in to talking to a 10-year-old who can probably understand barely where the 12th birth is going to be, never mind 20 years' time, it must be quite a challenge to keep the excitement going. I mean, is that something you've picked up on?
I think one of the things I find quite interesting is the transition into secondary school.
Right.
And actually, particularly on a gender basis, because, and looking at, careers in STEM and technology, obviously technology as for us, and looking at how girls might be excited about, going to space or looking at computing and things along those lines.
Yep.
And then you get to the point where you're into secondary school, you're age sort of 11, 12, and suddenly it's not cool anymore, or it's not really something you feel comfortable with amongst your friends. And I've watched this with my own children, I've watched this with others, where what you want is a groundswell of enthusiasm into the computing suite or into the DT, the design technology side of things, and getting into engineering. And then there's enough students of a variety who are in there that they feel safe and comfortable, otherwise they drop out. And I think that's actually a really important aspect of this, which is creating confidence, creating enough engagement and positivity. We do a lot that's to do with sort of thinking about creatively presenting what you're learning about, and so turning it into that STEAM side of things, science, technology, engineering, art and mathematics. And then you engage so many more people in a different way, and particularly young girls as they're growing up and feeling confident about what they love.
And of course, we can't have a conversation about reaching out to people without talking about the social media side of things, the content creators, the TikToks, etc. It has got, pardon my phrase, a bit of a bad rap, hasn't it? It's been as trivial and doom scrolling and just scrolling through stuff. Surely there's a place for this to play in a more positive, proactive way.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the thing that we notice is that if you go online and do a search for space industry stuff, you look at TikTok, you look at Reddit, you look at Instagram, there is nothing about the UK space sector, really, if we're being really honest about it. Everything is NASA. NASA has an incredible image archive. They've got really good presence on Instagram, on TikTok. They have millions of followers. If you look at the UK Space Agency or lots of learned societies in the UK related to space, I think we totted them up and they had about 40 followers on TikTok between them.
Isn't that the British disease?
Pardon?
Is that the British disease? We are too self-deprecating, too
well,
modest.
We are,
approach.
but we haven't put anything out about ourselves online. If you look at the, I don't want to single them out, but the UK Space Agency Instagram account, there's posts which, it's good that they're posting on Instagram, it's great, but the posts are really only about astronauts, and they only have astronauts going to a conference and presenting nicely, which is very good for an adult understanding the industry. But if you want to get someone who's 10, 12, kind of on Instagram, whether or not they're allowed to be, I'm not sure, but
12, you mean,
12, then 12.
Or 14, perhaps, in
but
some
what they need
circumstances.
is something that's actually really interesting, something that's going to capture them, beautiful Earth observation images that actually make people stop and look and go, wow, I can see where I live from space. That's really cool. And NASA is really good at this. So I'd really love the fact that I would want a 12-year-old to go online and to be able to understand what are we doing in the UK.
Whether or not it's social media or whether it's searching on, internet, some kind of search engine, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's that we need to create content that is engaging and exciting and fun and that inspires our young people to go, this is what I want to do with my life. We want them to create those sort of core beliefs about what they are aspiring towards. And that creates a momentum. And you kind of go away going, when I grow up, I want to be. You want to give them that power, which will, even if, maybe their path isn't exactly straight, but they've got some kind of momentum that pushes them through the not so enjoyable bits of education. And then they'll go, I've made it. I got to the space industry. I mean, maybe I don't work directly in it, but I'm in a parallel part. And they have that joy that I see in a lot of people in the space industry, that they got to their dream job.
Yeah, I think we need some space influencers.
Yes.
And we need to remove a bit of red tape about comms. You're there, Jenny.
Have you ever come across Galactic Gal? She's brilliant, Camille Bergen.
Yes.
I met her. At Viasat. You probably.
Yes,
yeah.
we need her for the UK.
Yeah, we absolutely do, and I'll make that happen. You heard it here, folks.
That's fine. In episode 2, actually, gosh, that was weeks ago now, we were talking about sustainability, and that was a really quite deep philosophical conversation. It completely blew the socks off me. But we had the splendid Rocket Rhea, who has her own TikTok channel, and that's that type of, I say, larger-than-life, bubbly person who is a great communicator as well. And they exist. It's just actually finding them, and that's in the same way as when I was doing research for this series. I didn't know about you. I'd seen you in your white coat at SpaceCom, and I was a bit scared to talk to you because you look very scary.
To be honest, the white coat is actually a little bit of armour to protect me, because I was a little bit scared of the small children, and originally when I started out. So it goes both ways.
But equally, because and meeting Heidi in person, it's seeing the human person behind what is something so clever, so cool, and you talk with such authority about the gaps in the space skills sector at the moment, and that humanising it. And equally, people don't know enough about how Work Like Jet is engaging with socially disadvantaged people. And just getting it out there, and hopefully this one small platform enabling that in one small way.
One small step for...
I set you up.
One giant leap.
No.
For space industry kind.
I've always said that in every episode of this is not about us, not about Technia. It's about actually giving people the opportunity to talk about stuff we don't talk about before. And we're really illustrating that very, very closely now. Let's talk about, climate change and things like that. Are there topical trends which you can use to engage with people, which is like a wooden horse, effectively, to get the conversation going?
Oh, 100%. Climate change is brilliant for that. And a lot of young people are very passionate about that. The ones in my household in particular have got a lot of strong opinions. I don't know where they get it from, and they are very keen on making sure that a difference is being made. And if you and then will be furious about the how much rocket fuel is being used. You're like, hang on a minute, let's look at it from both points of view. What's your sort of experience from that?
Yeah, no, exactly the same. Climate change and sustainability is hugely important to a number of young people. But no, I would agree with that in terms of taking it to a space that I shouldn't say space. Oh, the pun.
We do cliches on this.
I know they do, and I've completely lost my trail of thought as a result of it. No, it's gone. It's gone.
That's fine. So this is proof, everybody. This is a live recording.
It does happen.
We're running a bloopers edition later on. Jenny.
What I was thinking about is, so we've just developed some secondary school content that is about net zero, but we drive a virtual rover around a school collecting data and then analyse the data. So it's got programming in it, it's got data analysis. And the whole point of that is it's an engagement piece because of the interest in the environment. But I think what I would really like to do is move that content into a space environment. We might look at a rover on Mars or the Moon and collect data there. But I'd really also like to think about that Earth-focused satellites and create that double engagement. So you've got the excitement of space and you've got the sort of good tech for good concept which comes along with wanting to make a difference and address climate change issues. And that's it's a magic switch that will hopefully create a huge amount of inspiration.
Reading from my notes before this session, and we talked about terrestrial-based opportunities for space, which is
Yes.
a bit contradiction, but it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's so exciting to think about what these kids are going to have as jobs and to give them that sort of inspiration and go, you can do this. And from whatever your background is, from whatever your experience is, you have the potential to work in the space industry. Give them that. You know, it's such a gift. And we have those opportunities, all of us, for them.
But I think we also, sometimes we're really focused on getting people into the space industry. I'm sometimes less worried about that in a way. And I know this is a space
fine.
skills, tackling the space skills gap, but actually we use space to get students into working in kind of net zero sectors, and they're actually inspired by that. I think that's still a really good outcome. They don't necessarily, it's great if they work in space, but if they go work in another STEM area, that's something I think that's done that's good.
As well.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think creating the transferable skills, be they the more traditional ones, but also the technology ones. 'Cause you can have an understanding of technology and work in quite a wide variety of areas, but have the confidence to switch. And we did a panel about women pivoting from standard tech into space tech, and just sort of go, you can do it, it's okay. We had that was over the summer, we did that for the Women in Tech Week. It's about inspiring the potential in people, in anyone of any age group. And I know we're supposed to be talking about Gen Alpha, but I think anybody at any age can switch into a different industry. You've just got to have been given the confidence or find it within yourself. And sometimes that's hard.
And that's something I know which we're going to talk about in episode 5, because it's all about the skills availability. Where is it? This cross-industry transfer. So if you are somebody in mid-career who actually really loves what they're doing, how can you do it? And it's changing the mindset actually of the providers, because, oh no, you spent 10 years working in that organisation, you can't do it. It's looking back at the transferable skills, to use the phrase, and that often gets forgotten. We're coming to the end of this particular episode now, and this is so cool, but we are time restricted because of our orbiting pattern. Can you think back over the last perhaps 4 or 5 years, and it's not a question which I'd thought about until just now, what do you think has been the most significant impact upon the work you're doing with bringing young people on board? Not a fair question, but I like to throw googly in.
I'm happy to start with that. I think the thing that's making it more kind of bringing public awareness is actually what SpaceX is doing with reusable rocket launches, and actually more and more people are having a Starlink device on their house.
Yeah.
People are seeing the kind of trails of Starlink satellites going across the night sky. From an astronomer point of view, as under a previous life, dreadful. But people are talking about it. People are aware of reusable rockets. Actually, it's people just talk about it day to day, and I think that is something that's had such a big impact. And people, just public awareness of that is kind of one of the main first barriers to tackle before we can do anything else.
So space is still cool?
Space is always cool.
The thing I'm finding that my experience has been is going to events or exhibitions and things like that, conferences. You mentioned the Farnborough Air Show. We've been to Spacecom. I went to the one in Scotland, and Get With Programme's lucky enough to be the social value partner for the Spacecom that's coming up in London. But it's going to those events, seeing those amazing people talking. There's a variety. There's, I think, 3 conferences in the UK that are coming up really soon. Having those opportunities to see Professor Brian Cox or whoever it may be, and just be inspired by Helen Sharman, all sorts of people, but a physicality of it again. And some of these have got free entry, and you can go and be part of education aspects as well. I went to New Scientist, and that had got a whole space sector in that conference as well. I just think that's what creates some engagement and excitement. I thoroughly recommend anybody who gets the opportunity to go to those sorts of things.
And Laura?
Yeah, well, I dare say, because this is, again, it's one of the obvious ones, but we launched our, pun intended, we launched our space kind of strategy in 2022 when Virgin Orbit were doing their sort of launch from Spaceport Cornwall.
Oh, I went there not so long ago. It was amazing. I thoroughly recommend going there too.
Absolutely, and we took students there. We delivered our first space camp. So it's the increase in opportunities and the exciting things that are happening on UK soil is the biggest. Yeah, I mean, we're taking students up to Scotland, to Shetland, actually, in March. So, which, again, that's been a kind of year in the planning, and it's a very difficult place to get to. But it's really exciting.
Which is why I prefer remote delivery sometimes.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, I get that. And, we take students, going back to your point about NASA and comms around UKSA, we take students, some of our students have the opportunity through the Northrop Grumman Foundation to go to Huntsville, Alabama,
Wow.
to the US Space Camp. So we really wanted to bring a bit of that to the UK. And I learned an awful lot at Spaceport Cornwall. It was the first time I met you, actually, a few years ago. And understanding what is coming to the UK. We're slightly behind in some of the kind of, we can't take our students, and now I'm going to forget the name of it, but what's the thing that they sit in and it spins around? Centrifuge.
Centrifuge, the
We
spinny
didn't have,
thing.
yeah, we can't take the spinning thing. So we can't take our students to one of those. But they've got that in the States at the Huntsville site, and students get to go in it. But the
Health and safety
future,
nightmare.
of things, it's great. It's very safe. But the future, I think, is really exciting for the UK.
That's cool. I was thinking about this the other day. If you go back to, say, November of 2023, when those cold, dark nights, and I was in Belfast talking to all these different companies. Since then to now, I must have gone to about half a dozen UK-focused space events. And you alluded to a couple of minutes ago, Jeni. We've got Ignite Space in a couple of weeks' time, which is super cool. And also we've got Spacecom. Let's get a plug in for that. So, guys, come to Spacecom. It's a free conference, and it's showing the very, very best of what the UK has to offer. So whether you're a student, an old age pensioner, a young person, anybody has an interest, come along to Spacecom. I'd like to say thank you, ladies, very, very much indeed. This has been a real fun session. I always think how on earth this is going to be. We always talk about the preparation for it, but it just disappears into the ether, comes back down again. We've had multiple peaks, we've had multiple interactions. Thank you all very, very much indeed. And so, as we come to the end of this particular episode of Liftoff, it's been my great pleasure to meet with Laura, Heidi, and Jeni. So Bruce from Technia signing off for Liftoff, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.